What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. The Galar region is a huge new place that is filled with Pokémon. And of those new Pokémon, some of them are pretty great. But there are, of course, some rather questionable entries into the franchise. I considered waiting for the Expansion Pass DLC to do this, since there will be new Pokémon added. But that's still a ways out, and if anything truly glaring comes up, we can cover it then. Now, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but I think I can still conjure up the appropriate level of hurtful but constructive criticism. So, here are the top 6 Galar Pokémon I have a problem with. Number 6. Appleton. I realize we're starting on a controversial note, since I've already heard some people praise this Pokémon, but I don't think it's one of their best. Applin is fine, I suppose. It's not so much different from a regular apple, but it's more of a defense mechanism than anything else. But I do like Flapple, since the creature inside has burst out and is using the husk for armor and flight. And then there's Appleton. I don't really get the name. Is it a comment on its weight? I don't know. The main reason I'm not a huge fan of Appleton is because it just flat out becomes a pie. Again, some people might prefer that to the other one, but from my understanding, this grass and dragon type wasn't actually a piece of fruit. And even if it were, how would it be turned into a baked good of its own accord out in the wild? Because this could happen in the wild, since all it takes is an applin touching a sweet apple, which apparently grow naturally, so I don't see any man-made interference. Seriously, the apple part of this Pokémon goes from a healthy, living thing to a pastry just through the process of evolution. Did we look at this Pokémon and then get the idea for pies? Plus, it doesn't even get its own Gigantamax form. It has to have a carbon copy of Flapple's. I'm assuming Flapple is the originator anyway, since it comes first in the Dex, and again, a fully baked pie randomly reverts back into a regular apple. No wonder its eyes droop down in shame like a dog's floppy ears. I'd be upset too if I were unfortunate enough to live out the rest of my days as the living embodiment of diabetes. Whew! Still got it. Number 5. Grievant. Speaking of diabetes, Grievant is the early route 2-stage normal-type regional rodent of Galar. And again, they opted to make its defining feature to be profusely overweight. This is literally all a repeat of my problems with Diggersby. How could they do this again? It's just as big a slob because it keeps dropping berries everywhere that it had stuffed in its fat rolls. The only difference is that Grievant fell even shorter of my expectations. I was convinced when I saw Squavit that its evolution wouldn't stay pure normal. But, much to my disappointment, this stay-puffed squirrel chose to remain as bland as it possibly could. The only thing different from the other cringeworthy critter is that this one can be shaken out of berry trees. So this time it decided to steal from Crabrawler instead. Nothing about it is original, which means that there's not really too much more that I can say about Grievant. It's just unfortunate that they made the same questionable choices again to doom another cute Pokémon to a fate of being abandoned and forgotten just because it lost all self-control. Number 4. Mr. Rime. Look, we know that Mr. Mime is problematic, but even though I'm not in love with the new redesign or anything, I don't really mind it either. Turning it into a tap dancer does sort of take some of the creepy edge off. The problem here arises because they decided this Galarian form needed an evolution. Now, we did see a glimpse of Mr. Rime from a trailer before the release, and I thought to myself, oh, that's an interesting choice for a weird little elf thing, not realizing that it was in fact related to an older Pokémon in any way. I guess my main question comes from the extra face on its stomach. Does that thing actually work? Does it open up its navel mouth and gobble its prey whole so that it can digest them faster? And I shudder to think what honking the nose might unleash. If that second face isn't functional, then I don't understand the physiological reasoning for why it would be there. It's not even trying to be a scary face to ward off enemies. It's just smiling. And maybe the worst part of it all is that Mr. Rime has now completely overtaken the rightful place of Jinx. Now, I'm not crazy about that Pokemon either, but it was in lockstep with its counterparts in Gen 1 and 2, until it got too hot to put Jinx back in the spotlight, and it got passed over for an evolution in Gen 4. Well, now not only has Mr. Rhyme taken that privilege for itself, but it is the exact same typing as Jinx too. So not only is Mr. Rhyme completely unnecessary, but his mere existence is built over top of someone else's legacy. So enjoy your Cheerio eyes and your bowler hat while you can, because it looks like your chances of longevity are melting away. Number 3. The Impotent line. This is another one that might get me in hot water because I've seen some enthusiasm behind this line of Pokemon. But if you ask me, they kind of dropped the ball. I still have great faith in those in charge that they have some creative juices left. So, when I imagined the first Dark and Fairy type, there were a number of things that came to mind. Mischievous Imp seems a little on the pointed nose. I understand the concept, I really do. I just think they could have not given up after the very first idea they had? People have been complaining about Pokemon designs for years now, and how they're all terrible these days as opposed to the old ones. I'm not giving credence to that line of argument specifically, but you have to admit that Impidimp and his line are not at all in the same style as anything from the first few generations. The proportions of the limbs alone is cause for medical concern. Those arms and legs are just waiting to get snapped off as soon as a strong breeze comes through. There's no way its massive head could possibly be supported by any of its extremities. It does fill out a bit more when it evolves, but that's when the extra emo attitude takes over and it becomes a parody of the Dark type. Sure, they're supposed to be evil, but Morgrim just comes off as trying so hard with what he thinks is evil, but really has no idea that it takes more than a can opener for a ponytail and a smug look. And then Grimmsnarl, a lackluster, unimaginative name if ever there was one, has the audacity to have its overgrown hair cover its entire body, and peeling it back to actually use its appendages. This gangrene goblin is rude, gross, and just plain creepy if you ask me. I can respect the fact that other people might like these Pokemon, but when I look at the unique angle that they went with for Fairy and Ghost, it's hard not to think that they could have done better for Fairy and Dark, and improved upon the bare minimum of what would be expected by just about everybody out there. Number 2. Dracovish. I really like fossil Pokemon in general, but when I saw them in the Galar region, well, at first I was just perplexed, and then I had my trepidations. It's one thing to revive Pokemon that used to be alive, but this is clearly another branch of science altogether. The fossils in Galar are two separate halves of different organisms stitched into one. They are literally Frankensteining these creatures, except somehow the outcomes here are even more horrendous with terrifying implications. The first ones, I could tell were strange, but it wasn't until I saw Dracovish that I understood what was happening here, because it was the tail end of the first one with a fish head stapled to the tip. But I was truly horrified because they didn't even round off the pelvic area at all. They simply left the muscle exposed from however it was severed all those years ago. It looks like a cut of meat that you would order for dinner, just open and exposed on a living organism. In a game for children! How did this get past the censors? Moreover, how does this physically work? Did they manufacture an esophagus to the tip of the tail so that it could actually eat? Instead of manipulating its genetic structure so radically, surely you could make it easier on yourself and at least try and line up the relevant pieces. And the truly insulting part is that the Pokédex has the gall to imply that this atrocity actually existed in nature, by producing some nonsense about how it would have been all those years ago. But even if it wasn't a terrible mistake of science, those descriptions prove how preposterous it would be, talking about how fast it can run, but can only breathe underwater. I don't care how competitively viable it might be. That's no reason to forge monstrosities in a lab. Did we learn nothing from Mewtwo? I think Dr. Ian Malcolm hit the nail on the head when he said that the scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. And in this case, they definitely should have left well enough alone. Number 1. Drizzle. Now, last generation I gave Brion sort of a hard time, but compared to Drizzle, it is a work of art. I cannot begin to describe my disappointment in Sobble's evolution. Sobble was a lovely, cute little Pokemon that I could have seen myself using. But once I saw Drizzle, I was frightfully taken aback. No wonder Sobble's crying all the time if this is what it's going to turn into. This water reptile, for some reason, has adopted an emo look out of nowhere. And that's my main problem with this Pokemon. It is completely disconnected from everything around it. Sobble is timid and easy to provoke to tears. Then it becomes a miscreant complete with long, dyed hair. And then it becomes an international spy? What? Is that the growth chart for everyone in the espionage field? Crybaby, goth, licensed to kill? Even something as simple as the color scheme is off. Where does the green come from? Because the other two have matching yellow highlights. But Drizzle looks like it put on some mittens and dunked them in paint just to be different. And for some reason, this middle stage has the power of water balloons. What, do they manufacture them from their body? Do they stop at the store? I don't know. But it doesn't even result in a signature move, so what's the point? Again, it's a facet that is completely absent in the other two. To me, Drizzle seems like the last Jedi of Pokemon, in that one person started off the line pretty well, and then somebody else came in and did whatever they wanted with it, and then the one that started it just came back at the end and did what they had intended regardless of what came before. And it's real clear that the middle is an anomaly when you put all three of them together. Appleton is impossible, Grievant is a retread of previous mistakes, Mr. Rhyme is a hack, Grimmsnarl's lazy, Dracovish is a crime against nature, but Drizzle is the only one that literally has no reason to exist in its current form. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Pokemon on either side of its own evolutionary family. It looks more like a sick Scraggy trying to sneak into a water-type convention. Hopefully I've made my point about how utterly unforgivable Drizzle is, since I'm done giving this obtuse outlier any more publicity. So, those are the top 6 Galar Pokemon I have a problem with. Which Galar Pokemon do you find problematic? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!